A harmless question on national television turned our game show appearance into a nightmare when a hidden locket revealed a 30-year family secret, sending my father to the ICU. The lights were blinding. That's the first thing you don't realize when you're watching from your couch, munching on popcorn. On TV, it all looks so natural, so effortless. But sitting here, under the full glare of the studio rig, it felt like I was being interrogated by the sun. My makeup, which had felt like a thick, caked-on mask an hour ago, was now probably melting down my face in Technicolor rivers. Beside me, my husband Mark was sweating through his brand-new polo shirt, the one my mom insisted he buy for our big television debut. The Johnson family, our opponents, looked like they were carved from marble, cool, collected, and currently leading by 120 points. "All right, Miller family," Steve Harvey's voice boomed, a rich rolling sound that filled every corner of the studio and vibrated right through my chair. "Y'all are falling behind. I need some energy. I need some fire. Looks like your dad's the only one who had his coffee this morning." The audience laughed, and so did we. My dad, Robert, gave a theatrical bow from his spot at the end of our line. He was in his element, a retired history teacher who always fancied himself a bit of a showman. He'd already given one ridiculous answer about a historical figure that made Steve double over in laughter, and now he was milking it for all it was worth. My sister Jessica, standing next to me, just rolled her eyes, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of our podium. She was the competitive one. For her, this wasn't about having fun. It was about total annihilation of the Johnsons. Me? I was just trying to remember to breathe. This whole thing was my idea. A ridiculous pie-in-the-sky application I'd filled out late one night after a particularly grueling week at my nursing job. I never thought they'd actually call, but they did. And suddenly our very normal, very chaotic family from Ohio was being flown to Atlanta to be on Family Feud. It was a dream, but a terrifying, high-stakes, ridiculously bright dream. My hand instinctively went to my neck, my thumb and forefinger finding the cool, worn silver of the locket I always wore. It was my good luck charm. My mom, Linda, had given it to me when I left for college. It was an antique, heart-shaped and tarnished with age, with intricate floral engravings swirling across its surface. "It belonged to your great-grandmother," she'd told me, her eyes misty in a way I didn't understand at the time. "It'll keep you safe." It was beautiful, but it was a mystery. It was sealed shut, and my mom claimed the tiny, delicate key had been lost generations ago. I'd always been a little sad that I could never see what was inside, but I loved it all the same. It felt like a piece of my family's history resting right over my heart. Touching it now, I could almost feel my mom's calming presence, even though she was standing right at the end of our family line, looking more nervous than any of us. "All right, let's go," Steve called, pointing at the big board. "For 200 points, top 5 answers on the board. We asked 100 married men. Name something your wife has more of than you do." The iconic clang of the bell echoed as Jessica and the Johnson family matriarch, a terrifyingly perfect woman named Brenda, lunged for the buzzer. Brenda was faster. "Shoes!" she yelled, her voice crisp and confident. Bing. The number 1 answer flashed on the board. My heart sank. The Johnsons were going to play. They conferred for a moment, their blonde heads all huddled together like a flock of golden retrievers, before effortlessly rattling off the next 3 answers: clothes, worries, and pillows on the bed. Steve was laughing, the audience was roaring, and I could feel the fast money round slipping through our fingers like sand. They had 1 answer left to get, and 3 strikes. 1 more correct guess, and they'd sweep the round. Their youngest son, a clean-cut college kid named Kyle, stepped up. "What about, words, Steve?" The audience oohed in approval. It felt like a good answer. My dad groaned beside me. Steve Harvey milked the moment, strolling across the stage. "You say your wife has more words than you do?" He looked at the board. "Survey says." A horrible, jarring buzz filled the air. A big red X appeared next to their score. The Miller family exploded. Jessica screamed. My dad pumped his fist, and Mark actually jumped up and down. We had a chance. The Johnsons got their 3rd strike on the next guess, makeup, and the game was ours to steal. "Miller family," Steve's voice was electric. 1 answer on the board, 200 points on the line. You get this, you take the lead. I don't want no foolishness now, talk amongst yourselves. We huddled together, a frantic, whispered conference. "What could it be?" Jessica hissed. "Friends," my dad suggested. "Debt?" Mark offered grimly. We all shot him a look. My mom was quiet, just wringing her hands. We've got to have a captain's answer, Jessica said, looking at me. Chloe, it's all you. What do you think? 5 pairs of eyes, my entire world, were staring at me. The studio lights felt even hotter. My mind was a total blank. The pressure was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I glanced at my mom, who gave me a small, tight-lipped smile of encouragement. My fingers found the locket again, a desperate anchor in a sea of panic. Chloe, I need an answer. Steve's voice jolted me back to reality. I took a shaky breath. What do women have more of than men? My mind raced through stereotypes, jokes, everything. And then an image popped into my head. My mom, years ago, sitting on my bed, giving me the necklace, her misty eyes, the sadness she was trying to hide. Secrets, I blurted out. The word hung in the air. The studio was silent for a beat. Jessica's eyes widened. My dad looked confused. Steve Harvey stared at me, his playful demeanor gone, replaced by a look of intense curiosity. He held my gaze for a long moment before turning slowly, dramatically, to the board. Your family's trailing. The Johnsons are on the verge of victory. You need this to stay in the game. He paused, letting the tension build until it was almost unbearable. You said, secrets. Survey says. Bing. The final answer lit up the board. Number 5. Secrets. The studio erupted. We were screaming, hugging, a chaotic mess of pure joy and relief. We had the lead. We were going to fast money. I felt dizzy, lightheaded with adrenaline. We won the next round on a technicality, and then just like that, it was time. Me and my dad were going to play for $20,000. My dad went first, sequestered backstage in a soundproof room. I stood next to Steve at the podium, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure the mic could pick it up. The clock started. Name a reason you might be late for work, Steve fired off. Traffic. Name a fruit that's yellow. Banana. Name something you might find in a toolbox. Hammer. It was going well. I was in a rhythm. Then came the 4th question. Name something, Steve said, his voice even and steady, that a mother passes down to her daughter. And my world stopped. It wasn't just a question. It was the question. The air left my lungs. The roaring of the crowd faded into a dull buzz. The blinding lights dissolved into a blurry haze. All I could see, all I could feel, was the silver heart resting against my skin. The image of my mother giving it to me flashed in my mind again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just sadness in her eyes, it was fear, a deep, profound fear. This will protect you, sweetie. Her words echoed in my head, but they sounded different now, not like a promise, but like a warning. What does a mother pass down to her daughter? Recipes, jewelry, advice. My mind screamed the easy answers at me, the answers that would get points on the board. But my mouth wouldn't work. My throat closed up. The locket suddenly felt heavy, unbearably heavy, like it was filled with lead. A single, hot tear spilled over and traced a path through my foundation. Then another, and another. Chloe? Steve's voice was softer now, cutting through the fog. I need an answer. I opened my mouth to say, jewelry, the most obvious answer, the one tied to the object causing me so much turmoil. But what came out was a choked, strangled sob. I couldn't stop it. The dam broke, and years of a nameless, formless anxiety I never understood came pouring out of me on the stage of a nationally televised game show. I covered my face with my hands, my shoulders shaking with uncontrollable sobs. The studio fell utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The game clock buzzed, signaling my time was up, but it sounded distant, like it was coming from another room. Whoa, 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 hold on now. Steve's hand was on my shoulder, warm and steady. I heard him speak into his lapel mic. Cut the cameras. Somebody get her some water. Cut the clock. Stop everything. The fantasy was over. This was real. I was having a complete and total breakdown in front of hundreds of people. Mortification warred with the overwhelming wave of emotion. Through my fingers I could see the crew rushing around, my family looking on from the side with faces of pure shock and concern. My mom's face was ashen. Steve knelt down slightly to be at my eye level, his expression stripped of all showmanship. It was just pure, human concern. Hey, look at me, he said gently. It's all right. Just breathe. What's going on, sweetheart? It's just a game. What happened? I couldn't form a coherent sentence. I just shook my head, the tears still flowing. My hand, trembling, rose from my face and pointed a shaky finger at the locket on my chest. It's this, I whispered, my voice hoarse. This necklace. Steve frowned, his gaze dropping to the silver heart. He saw the intricate design, the aged patina. What about it? Is it from your mom? I nodded, wiping my eyes with the back of my other hand. She gave it to me. Before I went to college, she said the truth was inside. I took a ragged breath, the confession tumbling out of me. But she never gave me the key. She said it was lost. Steve Harvey looked from the locket on my chest to my mother, who was now standing frozen by her podium, her face a mask of what looked like pure terror. He looked back at me, and then peered closer at the necklace, his brow furrowed. The charismatic game show host was gone, replaced by someone sharp, observant, his eyes missing nothing. He leaned in closer, his voice a low whisper that the microphone barely caught. "Sweetheart," he said, his eyes locked on the side of the locket. "I don't think you need a key." And with his thumb, he gently pushed on a tiny, almost invisible seam in the engraved floral pattern along the edge. There was a soft, metallic click. The sound was small, almost insignificant, but in the cavernous silence of the studio, it was like a gunshot. Click. My breath hitched. For a decade I had twisted that locket, run my thumb over its every curve, even tried to pry it open with a needle once in a fit of teenage curiosity. All to no avail. I had accepted it as a sealed object, a beautiful, impenetrable piece of my history. And now, with a simple, knowing touch, Steve Harvey had opened it. The silver heart swung open on a delicate, hidden hinge, revealing two tiny, hollowed-out compartments. The studio, the audience, my frantic family. It all dissolved. My entire universe shrank to the size of a quarter. My hand, guided by some force I didn't recognize as my own, reached out and took the locket from his fingers. It felt impossibly light now, as if the weight I'd always felt was not in the metal, but in the secret it held. One side of the locket was empty, the silver inside dark and tarnished. But the other side held a minuscule, tightly folded square of paper, yellowed with age, brittle as a dead leaf. It was tucked so perfectly into the heart-shaped frame that it looked like it had grown there. My tears had stopped. A strange, cold calm washed over me. This was it. The reason for the nameless anxiety I carried, the answer to a question I never knew I was asking. "Chloe?" Steve's voice was a low murmur beside me. He was still kneeling slightly, a silent guardian in a sharp suit. "You okay?" I couldn't answer. My fingers, clumsy and trembling, fumbled with the tiny piece of paper. It felt like I was performing surgery. I was terrified it would crumble to dust before I could read it. Carefully I worked it out of its silver nest and onto the palm of my hand. It was no bigger than my thumbnail. Unfolding it was an agonizingly slow process. The paper resisted, its creases set deep over what must have been decades. As I finally flattened it out, I saw the writing. It was my mother's handwriting, but not the familiar looping cursive from birthday cards and grocery lists. This was the script of a younger woman, tiny and spidery. The blue ink faded to a pale ghost. There were only 6 words that dismantled my entire life. "He is not your father. I'm sorry." The paper fluttered from my numb fingers and drifted to the polished black floor. The cold calm shattered, and a roaring began in my ears. "He is not your father." The words didn't make sense. My father was Robert Miller, the man who taught me how to ride a bike, whose shoulders I sat on at parades, the man who walked me down the aisle, his own eyes brimming with tears, the man standing not 20 feet away, his face etched with a confusion that was rapidly turning to fear. It was impossible. A joke. A mistake. I lifted my head, my eyes searching, pleading. I didn't look at Steve. I didn't look at my husband or my sister. I looked straight at my mother, and in that moment I knew it was true. Her face was a portrait of devastation. There was no denial, no confusion. There was only the raw, agonizing confirmation of a lifelong lie being ripped into the light. Her hand was over her mouth, her body rigid with a terror so profound it seemed to steal the very air around her. Our eyes locked across the stage, and in that silent, horrifying connection, she gave me the answer. The note was real. The secret was out. "Mom!" The word was a shattered whisper. It was all I could manage. It was an accusation, a question, and a cry of pure agony all at once. My dad took a step forward. "Linda? What's going on? Chloe? Honey, what is it?" His voice was full of paternal concern, and hearing it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He looked from my broken expression to his wife's terrified one, trying to solve an equation with missing numbers. Jessica and Mark rushed towards me, but Steve subtly put a hand out, holding them back, giving me space. He understood this was a moment that couldn't be crowded. My mom didn't answer me. She just stared, tears now streaming down her own face, her silent apology screaming across the space between us. My dad's gaze followed mine, and then dropped to the floor, where the tiny damning piece of paper lay between us. "What is that?" he asked, his voice wavering now. He was finally sensing the shape of the monster in the room. Before anyone could stop him, he walked forward. He moved like a man in a trance, his happy-go-lucky game show demeanor gone, replaced by a grim, determined focus. He bent down, his knees cracking audibly in the silent studio. The audience was a single, holding breath. I could hear a woman in the front row gasp. He picked up the fragile square of paper. His big, calloused hands, the hands that had built my childhood treehouse and held mine when I was sick, looked monstrously large, holding the tiny confession. He brought it close to his face, squinting under the bright lights to read the faded ink. I saw the exact moment the words registered. It wasn't a loud reaction. There was no shouting, no dramatic collapse. It was quieter, and 1,000 times more terrible. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly, gray pallor. His shoulders, which had been puffed with pride just minutes before, slumped as if a physical weight had been dropped onto them. His mouth opened slightly, a silent gasp for air that wasn't there. His eyes, the kind, crinkling eyes I had always believed were mine, lifted from the note and found my face. And for the first time in my 30 years, I looked into my father's eyes and saw a complete and utter stranger. He looked at me not with the love and recognition of a parent, but with the stunned, bewildered pain of a man who had just been stabbed in the back by his entire world. The connection that had defined my life, the bedrock of my identity, evaporated under the heat of the studio lights. My mother let out a strangled sob. "Robert, I can explain." But he wasn't looking at her. He was still looking at me, his gaze full of a new, horrifying question. His hand, still holding the note, began to tremble violently. Then his eyes rolled back in his head, and his legs gave out from under him. He crumpled to the floor in a heap, the tiny white note still clutched in his fist. The thud of my dad's body hitting the stage was a sickening, final sound. For a second, everyone was frozen, suspended in disbelief. Then the studio exploded into chaos. Medics, producers, and a frantic-looking stage manager swarmed the stage. My sister Jessica screamed, a raw, animal sound of pure terror, and rushed towards him, with my husband Mark right behind her. I remained rooted to the spot, my feet leaden, my body a statue of ice. I could see them kneeling beside him, yelling his name, but their voices sounded distorted, like they were coming from underwater. Steve Harvey was the first one to my mother. He put a firm hand on her arm. "Ma'am, what have you done?" he said, his voice low and tight with an anger I wouldn't have thought possible from the jovial host. She just shook her head, her body racked with sobs, unable to speak, unable to move. A medic with a red bag was now pushing Jessica and Mark gently aside, checking my dad's pulse, shining a tiny light into his unseeing eyes. "We have an unresponsive 65-year-old male," he shouted to someone off stage. "Let's get a gurney in here now." The word unresponsive finally broke my paralysis. A jolt of pure, primal fear shot through me, overriding the shock. This wasn't a game show anymore. This wasn't about a secret. This was about my dad, the man who raised me, the only father I had ever known, lying unconscious on the floor because of a truth I had unearthed. A wave of guilt so powerful it made me nauseous washed over me. I had done this. My stupid question, my stupid tears, my stupid necklace. I stumbled forward, pushing past a producer who tried to stop me. "Dad," I cried, my voice cracking. I knelt on the other side of him, my hand hovering over his shoulder, afraid to touch him, afraid I would somehow break him more. His face was slack, his skin clammy. The tiny damning note was still clenched in his fist, a white flag of surrender. "Sir, can you hear me?" "Robert," the medic said, rubbing his sternum hard. There was no response. They loaded him onto the gurney with practiced efficiency. As they started to wheel him away, my mother made a move to follow, but Jessica shot up from the floor like a viper. "Don't you dare!" she shrieked, her face contorted with a rage I had never seen before. She pointed a trembling finger at my mother. "You stay away from him. You did this." Jessica, please, my mother begged, her hands outstretched. No, you don't get to be near him. Jessica's grief was morphing into pure, unadulterated fury. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. And you? How could you? In front of everyone. You had to do this here. I didn't know, I sobbed, the accusation hitting me like a physical blow. Jess, I swear I didn't know what was in it. It doesn't matter. You broke him. Mark stepped between us, putting his hands on Jessica's shoulders. Jess, stop. This isn't the time. We need to go to the hospital. He looked at me, his own face pale and strained. Chloe, come on. The journey to the hospital was a blur. The studio whisked us into a black town car, the tinted windows shielding us from the bewildered faces of the audience members who were being ushered out. Jessica sat in the front seat, rigid and silent, refusing to look at me or my mother. I sat in the back, wedged between my mom and Mark. She was still weeping silently, her face buried in her hands. Mark held my hand, his grip the only thing keeping me from flying apart into a million pieces. The silence in the car was deafening, thick with betrayal and unspoken questions. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my dad's face as he read the note, the light in his eyes extinguishing. At the hospital, we were led to a sterile beige waiting room. A kind but firm producer from the show stayed with us, handling the hospital administration, a silent, suited specter of our public humiliation. Jessica paced the length of the small room like a caged tiger, while I sat huddled in a chair, my body trembling with cold despite the stuffy air. My mother tried to sit near me, but I flinched away, and she retreated to the furthest corner, a pariah in her own family. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor in blue scrubs came in, her face grim. Family of Robert Miller? We all shot to our feet. I'm Dr. Evans, she said. Mr. Miller has had a major cardiac event, a heart attack. We've managed to stabilize him for now, but he's in critical condition. The next 24 hours are crucial. The clinical words hung in the air, cold and sharp. Heart attack. Critical condition. Jessica let out a choked cry and crumpled into Mark's arms. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. I had given my father a heart attack. Is he going to be okay? I whispered, the words barely audible. We're doing everything we can, the doctor said, her tone professionally non-committal. He's in the ICU. You can see him, but only one at a time for a few minutes. Jessica immediately pulled away from Mark. I'm going first. She shot a venomous glare at my mother. She is not going in there. Ever. The doctor looked confused but didn't argue. As Jessica followed her out, my mother finally spoke, her voice raspy from crying. Chloe, baby, I need to explain. Explain? I spun on her, a sudden, hot rage boiling up through the fear and guilt. Explain what? That my entire life is a lie. That the man lying in that hospital bed, the man who might die, isn't my father. What is there to explain, Mom? It's not that simple, she pleaded, taking a step towards me. It seems pretty simple to me, I shot back, my voice rising. 6 little words, Mom. You boiled my whole identity down to 6 words and hid it in a necklace. Who is he? Who is my real father? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I can't. You can't, or you won't. Ayakit. I was yelling now, the raw emotion pouring out of me. The producer in the corner looked profoundly uncomfortable but didn't move. Does he even know I exist? Who is this man you lied to everyone about? He knows, she whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor. He's a good man, Chloe. He wasn't right for us. Your father, Robert, he was stable. He loved me. He promised to love you as his own, and he did. He was a better father than... Than who? I pressed, stepping closer to her, my hands clenched into fists. Say his name. You owe me that much. You owe him that much. Say his name. My mother looked up, her face a mess of tears and desperation. She looked past me, her gaze unfocused, as if seeing a ghost from a lifetime ago. Her lips parted, and for a moment I thought she was finally going to tell me. She was going to give me the one piece of information I needed to start making sense of the wreckage of my life. But she didn't get the chance. The waiting room door swung open, and it wasn't Jessica or the doctor. It was Steve Harvey. He wasn't wearing his showman's suit anymore. He was in a simple black polo shirt and jeans, his face etched with worry. He held a phone in his hand, and his expression was one of profound shock. I am so sorry to intrude, he said, his deep voice soft and respectful. The hospital called the studio looking for next of kin, and the producer gave them my number. They found your father's wallet. He took a deep breath. his eyes locking on mine. In his wallet, there was a folded-up laminated newspaper clipping from about 30 years ago. It's a birth announcement. My blood ran cold. Steve looked from me to my mother, a look of dawning, horrified understanding on his face. "Chloe," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "the announcement was for you. And the father's name listed, it's the same last name as the Johnson family, your opponents on the show today." The words hung in the sterile air of the waiting room, thick and suffocating. Johnson. The name echoed in the silence, colliding with the image of the picture-perfect family from the television studio. Brenda, with her crisp, confident voice. Her husband Tom, with his easy smile. Their clean-cut college kid, Kyle. Golden retrievers. That was my thought. A happy, cohesive unit. And now I was being told that my origins were tangled up with theirs in some incomprehensible way. My head swam. I reached out a hand to steady myself against the wall, the cool paint a stark contrast to the fire roaring through my veins. "What?" I breathed, the sound getting lost in my throat. "No, that's not possible." My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half strangled gasp. She sank into a chair, her face in her hands, her body shaking. The confession was in her collapse. It was true. All of it. Steve took a hesitant step forward, his expression a mixture of pity and shock. "The father's name on the announcement was Thomas Johnson," he said, his voice gentle, as if he were delivering a eulogy. "They asked me if I knew him. I had to tell them he was just in my studio. Chloe, I am so sorry." Thomas Johnson. Tom, the smiling patriarch of the Johnson family. The man who had been standing just a few feet away from me for hours, laughing and joking, completely unaware that the daughter he apparently had was competing against him on a game show. The absurdity of it was staggering. A plot twist from a soap opera that had just crashed headfirst into my life. My rage at my mother was instantly eclipsed by a tidal wave of confusion. I looked at her, a crumpled heap of secrets in the corner chair. "Tom Johnson?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "The man from the show? That's my father." She couldn't look at me. She just nodded into her hands, her shoulders heaving. The puzzle pieces began to slam into place with brutal, sickening force. My mother's nervousness before the show, which I'd mistaken for simple stage fright. The way she'd barely made eye contact with the Johnson family during the introductions. Her frozen, ashen face when I'd been selected for the face-off against Brenda Johnson, Tom's wife. My God, his wife. My mother had stood on a national stage and played a friendly game with the wife of the man she'd had a child with, a child she'd raised as another man's. "Did he know?" I demanded, my voice rising again. "Did he know you were going to be there? Did you plan this?" The thought was monstrous, but my mind was reeling, grasping for any explanation, no matter how insane. "No," she cried, finally looking up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Of course not. It was a coincidence, a horrible 1,000,000-to-1 coincidence. When I saw their name on the call sheet, I tried to back out. I swear I did. But you were all so excited. I didn't know what to do. I prayed they wouldn't recognize me. It's been 30 years, Chloe." 30 years. A lifetime. She had carried the secret for my entire existence, and it had taken a fluke appearance on a game show for it all to detonate. Mark, who had been standing by silently, his own face a mask of shock, finally moved. He came to my side, wrapping a protective arm around my shoulders. "Chloe, maybe we should just focus on your dad right now," he said softly, his voice a calm anchor in my storm. But he was wrong. This was all connected. Robert's collapse, the lie, the Johnsons. It was a tangled, venomous knot, and pulling on one thread had unraveled the whole thing. Just then the door opened again. It was Jessica. Her eyes were puffy and red, but the fury had settled into a hard, cold resolve. She looked at our mother with pure hatred, then her eyes landed on Steve Harvey. "What are you still doing here?" she snapped. "Your sister needed to know something," Steve said grimly, gesturing vaguely toward me. Jessica's eyes narrowed, scanning the scene, me leaning against the wall, Mark holding me up, my mother weeping in the corner. "Know what? What else could you possibly have to say?" Before I could speak, my mother staggered to her feet. "Jessica, please, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to both of you." "I have nothing to say to you," Jessica spat. "You need to leave, now. Dad is in there fighting for his life because of you. I don't want you in the same building as him." "He is my husband," my mother wailed. "Is he?" Jessica's voice was like ice. "Or was he just a convenient lie you used to cover up your mistakes? How much of our life was real, Mom? Any of it?" The question hung there, unanswered, because we all knew the answer was no. Not really. Not the most fundamental part. "Ma'am, maybe your daughter is right," Steve said gently to my mother. "Maybe some space is what's needed right now." But it was too late for space. The door to the waiting room swung open for a third time, and this time my heart didn't just stop. It felt like it fell right out of my chest. Standing in the doorway were Tom and Brenda Johnson. They looked lost, their game show smiles replaced with expressions of deep concern and confusion. Brenda was holding a bouquet of cheap hospital flowers, and Tom was holding his hat in his hands, wringing the brim nervously. "Excuse me," Tom said, his voice hesitant. He looked around the crowded, tense room. We heard what happened to Robert, on stage. The producers told us he was brought here. We wanted to come and see if he was all right, to offer our support." His eyes, kind and blue, scanned the room and settled on me. They were the same color as mine. I had always been told I got my eyes from a distant grandmother on Robert's side. Another lie. I was staring into the face of my biological father, and he was looking back at me with the polite sympathy of a stranger. The silence that followed was the most profound I have ever experienced. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and sound out of the room. I saw Brenda's eyes flicker from my face to my mother, who had gone completely rigid, her skin the color of ash. A tiny flicker of recognition, of suspicion, crossed Brenda's face. She had been married to this man for decades. She knew his history better than anyone. She was putting the pieces together. Tom, however, was oblivious. He was still looking at me, his brow furrowed in concern. "Your father? He's a good man. We were so sorry to see him go down like that. Is there any news?" My mouth was dry. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My entire past and my shattered present were colliding in this beige, fluorescent-lit room. My mother, the woman who lied. The stranger who was my father. His wife, who was staring at my mother as if she was seeing a ghost. And me, the secret standing in the middle of it all. Jessica, however, had found her voice. She took a step forward, her body trembling with a rage so pure it was almost beautiful. She looked directly at Tom Johnson, a man she had never properly met, and uttered the words that would ignite the final devastating explosion. "He's not her father," Jessica said, her voice dripping with venom as she pointed a finger at me. Then she turned her head slowly, deliberately, and aimed that same pointed finger right at him. "You are." Tom Johnson recoiled as if Jessica's words were a physical blow. His face, which moments before had been a mask of polite concern, cycled through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, denial, and then a slow, dawning horror. His eyes shot from Jessica's accusing finger to my face, really seeing me for the first time. The same blue eyes, the same sharp line of a jaw, the faint dimple in my chin. The polite sympathy of a stranger was replaced by the thunderstruck recognition of a man staring at his own reflection in a funhouse mirror. "What?" he whispered, his voice cracking. He turned to my mother. "Linda, is that you?" The use of her first name was the final confirmation. They knew each other. Brenda Johnson let out a sharp, wounded gasp, the cheap bouquet of flowers slipping from her grasp and scattering across the linoleum floor. Her eyes, which had been flickering with suspicion, now blazed with the fury of a woman who had just realized her entire marriage was built on a foundation of lies. "Tom," she said, her voice a dangerous whisper. "What is she talking about?" But Tom wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking at my mother, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Linda, what is going on?" he demanded, his voice gaining strength. This was it, the point of no return. My mother, cornered and exposed, finally broke. "I'm so sorry, Tom," she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a frantic, incoherent rush. "I didn't know what to do. I was young. I was scared. You were married. You had just had Kyle. I couldn't ruin your life. And then I met Robert, and he was so good. He was kind. He wanted a family. He promised he would love her. And he did. He was her father in every way that mattered." Every word was a twisting knife, not just for the Johnsons, but for me. I wasn't just a secret. I was an inconvenience, a problem that had been solved with a lie. Robert Miller wasn't the love of her life. He was a solution. A stable, convenient man who had unknowingly raised another man's child. Brenda Johnson took a deliberate step forward, her eyes locked on my mother. The polite game show contestant was gone, replaced by a woman of steel. "You let my husband believe his child was gone?" she asked, her voice trembling with rage. "We thought. He told me you lost the baby. He mourned you. He mourned that child for years." I felt the ground give way beneath me again. Lost the baby. So he did know about the pregnancy. He just didn't know about me. My existence had been erased, not just from his life, but from his memory. Before the scene could escalate further, the waiting room door opened, and Dr. Evans stepped in. "I need everyone to lower your voices," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Her eyes fell on the Johnsons, the scattered flowers, and the raw emotion crackling in the air. She sighed, a weary sound. "Mr. Miller is awake," she announced. "He's weak, and he's confused, but he's asking for his daughter. He's asking for Chloe." Her words cut through the chaos like a surgeon's scalpel. He was awake, and he was asking for me, not Jessica, his other biological daughter. Me! Jessica's face crumpled, a mixture of relief and fresh pain. She looked at me, her anger momentarily forgotten, replaced by a desperate plea. "Go," she whispered. "He's asking for you." I walked past them all as if in a dream, past Tom, my biological father, who was staring at me with 30 years of stolen time in his eyes. Past Brenda, his betrayed wife. Past my mother, the architect of this entire catastrophe. I followed the doctor down the hallway to the ICU, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. He looked so small in the hospital bed, hooked up to a web of wires and tubes. His face was pale and gaunt, but his eyes were open. Those kind, familiar eyes, the ones I had looked into for my entire life, found mine as I stepped into the room. "Hey, Dad," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. He gave a weak smile, reaching a trembling hand toward me. I took it, his skin cool and papery in mine. "Hey, kiddo," he rasped. "Caused a bit of a scene, didn't we?" A laugh that was more like a sob escaped my lips. That's one way to put it. We were quiet for a moment, the only sound the steady beep of the heart monitor. He squeezed my hand gently. "The note," he said, his voice barely audible. "I read it." "I'm so sorry, Dad," I cried, the tears finally falling. "I never should have. I didn't know." Shh," he hushed me gently. "It's not your fault, Chloe. None of it." He took a ragged breath. "Your mother and we'll have a lot to talk about. But one thing is not up for discussion." He tightened his grip on my hand, his gaze intense and unwavering. "You are my daughter. Do you understand me? Biology doesn't make a father. Late-night feedings do. Bad crayon drawings on the refrigerator do. Walking you down the aisle, that makes a father. You are mine." The simple, profound truth of his words washed over me, cleansing the confusion and the hurt. He was right. Tom Johnson may have given me my DNA, but Robert Miller had given me my life. He was my dad. In the days that followed, the world slowly began to reassemble itself, albeit in a strange new shape. My dad, Robert, made a steady recovery. His quiet strength the anchor our fractured family clung to. His conversations with my mother were long and painful, held behind closed doors. I don't know everything they said, but I know that forgiveness is a messy, complicated process. Their marriage would never be the same, but it would survive, rebuilt on a foundation of painful, unvarnished truth. Jessica and I talked, really talked, for the first time in years. We cried, we yelled, and we held each other, rediscovering the sisterly bond that had been buried under years of petty rivalries. We were Robert Miller's daughters. That was our truth, and we clung to it. The studio, to their credit, was incredibly discreet. They paid for all of my dad's medical expenses and released a statement about a contestant having a medical emergency, with no mention of the underlying drama. They even gave us the money from the rounds we had won, a quiet apology for the chaos. As for Tom Johnson, he reached out. He wrote me a long, heartfelt letter, full of regret and confusion. He explained that he and my mother had a brief affair when he and Brenda were separated for a year. Long ago. When my mother told him she was pregnant and then, a month later, that she had miscarried, he was devastated but had no reason to doubt her. He asked if, when I was ready, I would be willing to meet him. Just to talk. It took me 6 months. 6 months of therapy, of family dinners that were initially awkward but gradually became warm again, of holding my dad's hand as he got stronger every day. I finally agreed to meet Tom for coffee. Brenda wasn't with him. He told me they were working through it, but it was hard. He was a kind man, full of a deep sadness for the life he never knew he had. It was strange and bittersweet. He was a biological fact, a ghost in my story, but he wasn't my father. We agreed to keep in touch, to perhaps build something new and undefined, but the gaping hole in my life I thought he would fill simply wasn't there. It had been full all along. The locket now sits in a small wooden box on my dresser. I don't wear it anymore. Its purpose is served. It no longer holds a secret but a lesson. That family isn't about the blood in your veins, but the love in your heart. And that sometimes the greatest truths are revealed not in a whisper, but under the blinding, unforgiving lights of a television studio.